This will stop all flooding in Florida and save lives, neighborhoods, and billions of dollars in damages. Florida's got a serious flooding problem. Whether it's from hurricanes or heavy rains, it seems like every year we're watching homes and businesses get swallowed up by water. Floridians are sick and tired of their lives being turned upside down from flooding, especially when we know there's a solution.
What is it? There's a real problem here. The county needs to step up and own it and resolve it and get this water out of here.
The Netherlands figured it out decades ago after one of the worst disasters in their history. Let's break it down what they did, why it worked, and how we can use the same idea right here in Florida. In 1953, the Netherlands experienced one of the deadliest floods in modern history. It was the kind of disaster that no one saw coming, but it changed everything. A massive storm rolled in from the North Sea, and the combination of heavy winds, high tides, and weak defenses caused water levels to rise by almost 15 feet in some areas. Think about that, 15 feet of water rushing into towns and homes. It was devastating. Over 2,000 people lost their lives that night, and nearly 100,000 others had to evacuate their homes. The flood destroyed more than 4,000 houses, left entire towns underwater, and caused billions of dollars in damage. It wasn't just a one-time hit. It completely disrupted the economy, families, and the future of the country. The Dutch realized they couldn't let this happen again. They had to come up with a permanent solution. So they built the Delta Works. It's a massive flood protection system that's been called one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. It costs about $5 billion to complete, which might sound like a lot of money, but when you think about what they were protecting, lives, homes, and businesses, it was worth every penny. The Delta Works is a combination of dams, levees, and giant storm surge barriers. These barriers can close off parts of the sea when a storm comes in, keeping the water from flooding the land. What's crazy is that most of the Netherlands is below sea level, meaning the ocean is literally higher than where people live. Yet they don't even need flood insurance anymore because the Delta Works is that effective. And listen, if a small country like the Netherlands can pull this off, what's stopping us from doing it here in Florida? We've got the technology, the money, and the need. Let's learn from the Dutch and protect our state. And flooding isn't just a problem in Florida, it's something that's hammering cities all over the US. And the price tag keeps getting bigger. Take Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. It completely wrecked New Orleans, causing over $161 billion in damages. That's billions with a B. More than 1,800 lives were lost, and entire neighborhoods were wiped out. People still talk about Katrina
in terms of just its raw power and size. Think of how tall a 2-story building is. That's how high the water was along the coast.
Because the damage was that bad. But it's definitely not the only storm that left a massive dent in the country. Hurricane Sandy hit New York, New Jersey, and surrounding states in 2012, leaving behind $70 billion in damages. Imagine that much money being washed away, literally. Hoboken, New Jersey was practically underwater. Nearly 80% of the city flooded, and their real estate market got slammed. Home values in some areas dropped by as much as 25%, and it took years for things to bounce back. And now let's talk about the 2 most recent hurricanes, Helene and Milton. Hurricane Helene was a monster. It became the 2nd deadliest storm to hit the US mainland in 55 years, with Florida taking the brunt of it. Helene caused over $98 billion in damage, and a huge chunk of that came from flooding. Entire communities were submerged, and 36 lives were lost in Florida alone. Think about it, 36 people gone, and thousands more displaced. Hurricane Milton wasn't far behind, racking up $72 billion in damage, with flooding again being one of the biggest culprits. Flooding isn't just a pain, it's deadly, destructive, and ridiculously expensive. If we could put a system in place like what the Netherlands did to stop this kind of devastation, why wouldn't we? It's not just about saving homes and businesses, it's about saving lives. Shouldn't that be worth the investment? I think so. Florida's beautiful and we need to protect it. Check this out. Florida needs to start paying attention because cities across the country are stepping up to fix flooding problems instead of just sitting around waiting for the next big storm to hit. And here's the deal. They're borrowing ideas straight from the Netherlands. Cities are realizing they can't keep throwing money at cleanup after every flood. They've got to invest in solutions that stop the damage before it even happens. Take New York City, for example. After Hurricane Sandy caused $70 billion in damage, they decided they'd had enough. They launched a project called the Big U, a Dutch-inspired flood protection system designed to protect Lower Manhattan. This system includes parks, seawalls, and barriers that double as public spaces. The price tag? $1.4 billion. Expensive? Sure. But compared to the billions they've already lost from flooding, it's a smart move. Then there's New Orleans. After Hurricane Katrina, they worked with Dutch engineers to rebuild their flood defenses. They spent $14.5 billion to create a new levee system, storm surge barriers, and pumps. It's one of the most advanced flood systems in the world right now, and it's already saving lives and property. Even Houston is jumping on board. After Hurricane Harvey dumped over 60 inches of rain and caused $125 billion in damage, the city invested in a Dutch-inspired plan to improve drainage and build retention ponds. They've already spent $2.5 billion on upgrades and have more projects in the works. The message is clear. Cities that take action are seeing results. They're protecting homes, businesses, and lives. If places like New York and New Orleans and Houston can invest billions to stop flooding, why isn't Florida doing the same? We got the coastline, the resources, and the technology. It's time to step up before the next big storm hits. And let me tell you, Tampa Bay is like a ticking time bomb when it comes to flooding.
You can't drive a car through this. It's impossible because it's just way too deep.
We're talking about one of the most flood-prone areas in the entire country. Tampa Bay itself is a massive body of water, and cities like Tampa, Bradenton, St. Petersburg, my hometown, and Clearwater all surround it. It's low-lying, packed with people, and surrounded by water on all sides. You couldn't design a more perfect setup for a disaster if you tried. Here's the wild part. Tampa Bay hasn't been hit by a direct storm in over 100 years. It's almost like we've been living on borrowed time. But experts say if a big storm like a Category 4 or 5 hurricane hit us head on, the damage could be catastrophic. We're talking $300 billion in losses. That's not just homes. It's roads, schools, hospitals, businesses, and whole neighborhoods gone. When Hurricane Helene hit, the Tampa Bay area dodged the worst of it, but we still saw massive flooding in coastal areas. The region racked up $12 billion in property damage from Helene alone. And then came Milton, which added another $9 billion to the tab. You can imagine what a direct hit would do. Now, my house in St. Pete, we're in a non-flood zone and a non-evacuation zone, so we didn't have to worry about flooding when the storms hit. That's exactly why we bought where we did. But the people living along the coastlines weren't so lucky. Some neighborhoods were underwater and others lost homes completely. If we built a Maslanta carrying style storm surge barrier, if you can pronounce that better than I can, let me know in the comments. But basically, these are two massive arms that we could use to close off the bay during a storm. It could protect all of Tampa and downtown St. Pete from catastrophic flooding. On top of that, we could create additional flood defenses in the channels between the barrier islands, or even take a bold approach by buying back destroyed homes from the last 2 hurricanes and turning certain islands into what they were meant to be, natural storm barriers. Tampa Bay is a growing area with a ton of families, retirees, and businesses. If we don't build something like a Dutch-inspired flood protection system soon, the next big storm could wipe out decades of progress. Protecting our homes and communities is worth every penny. And this could save Florida's real estate market too, which is one of the largest in the country. But here's the thing, flooding is like its Achilles heel. Every time a hurricane hits, it's not just the houses that take a beating, it's the entire market. Buyers get scared, insurance companies pull out, and suddenly the whole system starts crumbling, just like we're seeing now. If we want to keep Florida's housing market alive, we've got to start thinking about long-term solutions. Let's look at Fort Myers. A few years ago, Hurricane Ian tore through the area, leaving behind $113 billion in damage across Florida. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out, and some homes lost as much as 30% of their value almost overnight. Rebuilding It's not quick. Communities take years to recover from that kind of devastation. And in the meantime, people leave, buyers stay away, and the housing market suffers. Sound familiar? Right now, insurance companies are bailing on Florida left and right because the risk is just too high. The ones that are still here are charging sky-high premiums that most homeowners can barely afford. And it's not just about insurance. Buyers are getting nervous too. They don't want to invest in a house that might end up underwater. Literally. That's why homes in flood-prone areas are sitting on the market and not selling. Flood protection wouldn't just save money, it would give people peace of mind. And isn't that what we all want? Let's stop patching things up after every storm and start building for the future. Florida deserves it. Now, one of the biggest hurdles I see is the price tag. Let's be real, billions of dollars isn't something people want to spend on a problem that's going to happen at some time in the future. We're way too used to throwing money at cleanup after a storm instead of spending it up front to minimize the disaster. And yeah, we definitely need some federal funding to make something like this happen. And that's where it gets tricky. Why should a guy in North Dakota have to have his taxes go towards making Florida great again? See what I did there? But honestly, it's this kind of out-of-the-box thinking that Florida needs to focus on. I like to imagine we've got politicians working day and night coming up with ideas like this to protect us from the next big storm surge. But the truth is, that ain't happening. Here's the good news though. We got a great governor in Ron DeSantis, and I'd like to believe this is on his radar. At the very least, wouldn't it be amazing if they invited the lead engineer from the Delta Works project over to Florida? Someone who's actually overseen a system that works and could give us some real insight into how we can stop Florida from flooding out after every hurricane. It's ideas like this that could make a huge difference for our state. The threat of more flooding with the new hurricane season coming up has got some Florida homeowners very concerned, and they're looking to sell their houses. Check out this next video where I'll show you why sellers are now doing this in Florida. It's a brilliant strategy, and believe me, it works. Click here and I'll see you there.